Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Hamilton County's candidate forum for the offices of Indiana Senate District 30 and House Districts 37, 39, and 88. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that promotes informed and active participation in government. I'm Lisa Dick, president of the Hamilton County League. Our moderator this evening is Janet Chandler, League member and teacher at Hamilton Southeastern High School. Our Zoom technology is being managed by Sarah O'Shea of Carmel Clay Public Library, and I will be your timer. At this point, I'm going to turn my camera and my microphone off, and Janet Chandler, our moderator, will take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. This evening, we'll start with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate. And Mr. Ruckelshaus, we'll start with you first.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. I literally just about 10 minutes ago jumped out of my car. We've been talking to constituents all day today, on a beautiful day, I might add, and a lot of great conversations. And one of the conversations that we talked about at great length is what motivates me to be a state senator and ask for your vote for the next 4 years. Healthcare. Healthcare is very important to me and my family. My first 2 children were born with congenital glaucoma. It took 19 and 21 surgeries each to arrest that. And then my son, who had the glaucoma as well, when he was in 3rd grade, developed leukemia. He survived, and he's a cancer survivor. Fast forward, my youngest son, who graduated from Cathedral High School, co-valedictorian, and on his way to a full ride at Duke University, tragically dove into a shallow end at Guy's Reservoir and broke his neck. He became instantly a quadriplegic. Our family moved down to Atlanta, Georgia. My wife and my son did, and for a year I traveled back and forth. So I know what it's like to deal in healthcare costs and healthcare issues in the United States and in Indiana. I am resolutely focused on that issue of driving down healthcare costs and making sure that all of our services are well funded in the state legislature. It's very personal to me. It's very personal to all of you. And I'm going to continue to work for that in the next 4 years. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Moving now to Mr. Qaddoura.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for giving me this opportunity. I'm excited to be with you tonight. My name is Fady Qaddoura, and I'm a proud Hoosier by choice. I immigrated to the United States at the age of 19. And I never planned to run for public office. But like many in our community who were engaged in the political process in new ways, the fallout from the 2016 election showed me I could no longer afford to sit on the sideline. As an immigrant to the United States, I watched as the Trump administration banned immigrants from Muslim majority countries coming to places including Indiana. And the majority of our elected officials remained silent, including right here in Senate District 30. That was a wake-up call for me, and I'm sure it was for many others in the audience who will be watching this recording. The current rhetoric is literally playing with our lives. The COVID-19 pandemic has only increased this urgency. My wife, Summer, and I have been married for 17 years. We went through Hurricane Katrina and we became homeless. Despite both of us being educated, we lost our home, our possessions, and we made our lives rebuilt here in Indiana with 2 master's degrees and a PhD. I've been a public servant for 15 years. We are proud parents of 2 daughters who attend our local public school system in our district. I'm in this race because I want to leave the state in a better place for my kids and everybody's kids. I promise I will never stop working for you and your families. We need to fully fund our schools. We need to reduce healthcare costs in Indiana. We need to recover from COVID-19 as families, individuals, and communities. Again, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to having a meaningful conversation tonight.
Thank you so much. Mr. Huston. We can't hear you, Mr. Huston. Apologies, we should have tested everyone's volume ahead of time. I'm sorry. We still can't hear you. No, not yet. check to see if, or that sounded better. Try it again. Nope. Have you checked to see if you've got your microphone on, the volume on? Okay. Okay, so he'll get back on soon, hopefully. So we'll go to Ms. Rivera Cole up next. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Aimee Rivera Cole, and I've lived in Fishers for 13 years. My husband, Randy, and we have 2 kids. My son, AJ, graduated from Fishers High School, and he is now in school to become a teacher. And then my daughter, Allie, is a junior at Fishers High School. A little bit of background about me is I went to the IU Kelley School of Business for undergrad, and then I went to law school at Valparaiso University School of Law. And I'm running because I want to make families like yours and mine priorities at the State House again. You know, working as an attorney for almost 20 years, I've seen firsthand how our state's laws directly impact people's lives. And I think it's time for some changes. I think that Hoosiers deserve leadership that will consider the full impact of our decisions and focus on problem solving. I want to fight for an Indiana where Hoosiers come first. And my son, like I said, wants to be a teacher, and Indiana continues to rank at the bottom for teacher pay raises, and I don't want him to have to move away to get a job that pays. I'm committed to fighting for priorities that people really need, like making prescription drugs affordable and improving our public schools and building a more inclusive Indiana. And so I am looking forward to tonight, and I again thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Mr. Huston, would you like to try it again? Still not working. I'm sorry. Oh, it is now.
You can hear?
Yes.
I apologize about that.
It's kind of cutting in and out. Now we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. But not now. Okay, you continue to work on it. I'll move on to Ms. Klein.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Well, yes, thank you for having this forum tonight. I think it's really important that people get to hear from all of the candidates, and I'd also like to say I think it's really important the work that you all do. There are so many people that do not get involved in our elections that I think this year are starting to change their tune and wanting to get a little more involved than they had in the past. So I appreciate you being the rock and the staple in our community for that work. So thank you, League of Women Voters. A little bit about myself. I grew up here in the district in Carmel, went to the high school, student body president, went to Purdue, majored in political science, interned at the State House in 2001, which was a redistricting year. So I got some good experience in that budget session as well. Worked in commercial real estate and in some legal settings where I did valuations of manufacturing, industrial, hospitals, hotels across the state. A nice 30,000 foot view of the economic structure to our state and what's important when it comes to the businesses that come here and how those valuations affect everything from different regions of the state to the next. So that experience I hope will be valuable when I hopefully get elected here in November. Other work that I've done that I think is very relevant is I was at United Way of Central Indiana, where I worked with foster care who were aging out of care. So with the experience there, working with adult and child villages, I started to see some of the gaps that our state really has and can work on. And I hope to be an advocate for children in care, as well as the families that are adopting children there too. So on top of that, I just want to say that I have a lot of energy. I'm excited. I'm ready to serve the constituents of Carmel, and I hope that I can bring a voice to women, to mothers, to fathers, to grandparents, and to the kids of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Moving now to Ms. Dechert.
I was nervous to try that microphone there for a second. So my name is Pam Deckard, and again, as everyone has said, thank you to the League of Women Voters for doing this tonight. I think it's a valuable opportunity for people to listen and hear what everyone has to say. A little bit about myself. I'm a Hoosier born and raised, grew up in Northwest Indiana. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My mom and dad are both retired public school teachers with over 60 years in public education and as they retired. I've lived in Indianapolis for about 30 years. I went to St. Mary of the Woods College in Terre Haute, wonderful school, went to IUPUI for Master's in Nonprofit Management Public Policy. I also was an intern at the State House years ago. And my professional career has focused on 2 things: nonprofits, fundraising, and technology. I consider myself a nonprofit fundraising professional by trade. I've worked at small and large nonprofits, helping them to raise money at places like family homeless shelters, to high schools, to colleges, and all over. Professionally, I work at the largest provider of software and services and technology to nonprofits in the U.S., where I manage services for a $30 million product line. However, that's just kind of my professional life. I am an active volunteer throughout this district and throughout the community. I'm heavily involved with the YMCA. I have been on the board of the Y for 10 years, and I currently serve as the president of the board. I also am very involved in Lawrence Township Public Schools. My son is a middle schooler there, and I successfully helped to pass a referendum for capital improvements to Lawrence Township schools last year, and we're now seeing those improvements. I decided to run 2 years ago. I decided to run after getting involved with that referendum because the issues that I was hearing in the community just weren't being addressed. And those are public education. We have to attract and retain our public school teachers, and they need to be able to make a livable wage. Yep, thank you.
All right, Mr. Huston.
Maybe the third time is the charm.
Yes, that's right.
Oh my gosh, my apologies. I've been on these things all day. My headset must have just died. So my sincere apologies. Well, thank you to the league and for organizing this. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate. So I'm Todd Huston. I have the opportunity to grow up here in Fishers along with my wife Denise, and we've called it home since we were kids. Went through Hamilton Southeastern schools, and then have had the privilege of staying here and have both of our kids graduate from Hamilton Southeastern High School too. So Fishers means a lot to us. I've had the privilege to serve on the Hamilton Southeastern School Board, Hamilton Southeastern Schools Foundation, the Town of Fishers Planning Commission, and just a variety of things throughout this community that I love. In 2013-12, I was elected to the Indiana General Assembly, and since beginning that service, I've thankfully had the opportunity to help Hamilton Southeastern Schools, close a pretty severe funding gap that was created by a disproportionate funding formula. And since 2013, Hamilton Southeastern Schools has received almost $40 million in school funding due to my efforts. Worked hard to improve road funding for Fishers, including the State Road 37 project, 106th Street, interchange, the 3 lanes on I-69, and then just recently worked to change the local income tax formula to that will provide Fishers with almost $4 million in new revenue. So I've worked hard to make sure I continue to support a community that I love, and I'm most grateful and thankful to be able to serve. I've also had the opportunity to serve as the author of the last state budget, in which we invested $763 million in the K-12 education, positioned ourselves to the rainy day fund to be able to survive what none of us knew was a pandemic coming. So it's been my privilege to serve. I hope there are an opportunity to keep doing it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Again, we'll move to the question form questions now. You'll have up to 1 minute to answer, as I indicated before. And so our first question is going to deal with COVID-19. And so what I'm going to ask you is how, I guess, hindsight's always 100%, and so none of us were around during that last pandemic in 1918. So we did not keep as good or detailed records probably as we are for this particular pandemic. So I guess what's one thing, in looking back, that we could have done differently, and moving forward, what concern do you have with how we're still handling COVID-19? So like a reflection back on, if we had that 100% hindsight, what we should or would we have done differently? And then moving forward, your most area of concern. So we're starting first with Ms. Rivera Cole. You're muted. It's okay. It's going to be one of those nights, right?
I got it now. All right. So after this pandemic, we just can't simply return to normal. I think that it probably would have been a good idea if we had created, and we should create in the future, a what's the word I'm looking for? A crisis contingency and safety net fund that's separate from the general fund. So that would provide assistance during states of emergencies, like food banks and economic assistance to small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and healthcare providers. So that's like the looking back part of that question. And then what concerns do I still have? And I guess it is just the safety of our students and our teachers. I just want to make sure that the kids are able to get the education they need, but that everybody stays safe. And I know that there's a lot of, it's not an easy solution, but that would be my priority.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Moving now to Ms. Dechert.
Thank you. Well, I would say if hindsight were anything, I maybe wouldn't have kicked off my campaign a week before COVID started. So maybe that would have been better timing on my part. But yeah, I think that overall, we probably could have acted quicker with a faster mask mandate throughout the state. I think that we should have had testing faster to folks who needed it and individuals who needed it. I also saw a lot of school systems struggle to know exactly what to do and to make those choices. And I think we probably could have offered more guidance and support earlier on. In terms of what concerns me and what keeps me up at night is how do we have an economic recovery from COVID that's equitable for all Hoosiers, right? I easily transitioned my work at work from home. Not much changed for me. There are a lot of people that have hourly wage jobs. There are a lot of people who have small businesses, restaurants, and things like that are going under. We have to be able to make sure that those people can get back to work. They have proper transportation. I'm very concerned about food insecurity. The amount of people who are going to need that assistance is going to be great. I really want to make sure that as Indiana recovers, we have a recovery that's inclusive for everybody throughout the state and throughout all economic brackets.
Thank you, Ms. Deckard. Moving next to Ms. Klein.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I would say hindsight would be, we had some CARES Act money come in, obviously, from the feds. And I think at the time, it wasn't able, or maybe wasn't, distributed in a timely manner. And some of that money could still have gotten into the hands of the small businesses that closed in the state of Indiana during that crisis time. It might have only been another lease payment for them, or maybe 2 months or something to keep their doors open. So maybe an ombudsman or something that could get that money out a little quicker. And in the future, I think we're learning our lesson about who's essential. Women are essential, and childcare is essential. And not only can it increase, the wealth of our communities, all families, if we get quality childcare that can be affordable as well. I think we realize that we need that for everybody to get back to work, and we're still not out of the weeds on that issue. So I think we have a lot of work we could still, tackle this next year.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Moving next to Mr. Qaddoura.
Thank you for the question. First, let me give credit where credit is due. I appreciate everything Governor Holcomb did and our state leadership that have done to protect Hoosiers during this pandemic. I believe that we should have instituted a mandatory statewide mask wearing by following the recommendations of medical experts. and not following the rhetoric that comes out of the White House. I still call upon our governor to institute a statewide mandatory mask wearing until we have a vaccine, so that our businesses can open and our schools can open safely. Second, I would say we need our state General Assembly, both the Senate and the House, to truly invest in clarifying the funding issue that could threaten schools if they don't fully open, or the schools that received letter in the past saying that potentially you could lose 15% of your funding. So that needs to be changed. I appreciate the governor and the state leadership team and the Department of Education trying to push the counting day later in the fall, but we need to finalize this law. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Thank you very much for this question. I literally just finished the book a few weeks ago, The Great Pandemic of 1917, 1918. And looking back at what we saw, Indiana has to get healthier. Indiana leads the nation in obesity. We have found with COVID-19 that those populations that are high in obesity and diabetes they are very ripe for this disease. And this is a major problem. I'm already going forward, working with Senator Jean Breaux about strategies for next session and the Black Caucus about those populations, about what we can do to get healthier. One of the things that we also passed last session was raising the smoking age to 21. Again, we need to focus on what strategies to get healthier as Hoosiers.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Mr. Huston.
Well, thank you. And I think that, looking back, I'm not going to worry about what we could have changed because it's already happened. I think what you learn from, I think what we realize, as John just said, we have to have strategies to help Hoosiers be healthier. This virus attacks those in the poorest health, and we need to have strategies to do that. I also think we realize that there has to be a more systemic method around county health departments and consistency among those operations. That being said, moving forward, I think, biggest challenge is, I think, how do we get people back to work, heal our economy, and do it safely? I think there are strategies, and we look forward to continuing to implement them to do that. Indiana has seen a huge drop in its unemployment rate, all the way down to 6.4% this past week. And we can get people back to work. We can get people back to work safely, and we can do the same thing with making sure our students get educated safely too.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Our next question first will go to Mr. Qaddoura. And so this is an economic question. So I guess, how do we continue to maintain a strong economy in the state? I realize the COVID issue is going to play into this, but I'm really kind of outside of the COVID issue. And then also, would you support increasing the minimum wage for the state of Indiana? And so that goes to you first.
So I'll start with your last question. I support a living wage law that gets adjusted with inflation, because the moment you set a minimum wage, then normally elected officials keep it at that for many decades without changing it. On your first question, in terms of economic responses to COVID-19, we truly need a stimulus package in the state of Indiana to uplift our businesses. Every single day when I speak with voters in District 30, there are small businesses who shut down. They lost their livelihood. And there are those, I was speaking with a voter a few days ago, eviction notices, unemployment, their unemployment insurance doesn't cover even their rent. Businesses need a strong, educated workforce. And if we're not investing in the social issues to protect our communities, we will not have a sufficient workforce to support our businesses. But in short, I would say a stimulus package for small businesses in the state of Indiana is required immediately, and a moratorium on evictions and cutting utilities is also mandatory, or it needs to be implemented immediately.
Thank you. Mr. Huston.
Thank you. Well, I think we showed how it was done pre-pandemic. We had a great business environment. We were attracting people, attracting jobs. Wages were going up, and obviously the pandemic has created a speed bump. But we quickly recovered from that because we positioned ourselves to be able to manage through it with having a rainy day fund, so we didn't have to cut necessary government programs. We committed 100% to K-12 education, and we're going to continue to make sure we have a strong tax and regulatory environment that attracts businesses. We literally have businesses calling us every day, trying to get from states have treated them like a foe and an adversary through this, to a state that we try to partner with business. And I think that's what's going to drive the economy. I'm super excited about the opportunities to raise wages through that. And for that, I don't think we need a minimum wage, government minimum wage increase. I do think that's going to happen naturally through the types of jobs that we're attracting.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Ms. Rivera Cole.
I remembered that time.
Okay. It's okay.
Well, I mean, pre-COVID, post-COVID, I don't know that I necessarily agree that we were doing fabulous. I think that Indiana we could do a better job attracting and retaining business opportunities if we increase our state's reputation for hospitality, diversity, and freedom from discrimination. We could pass common sense legislation, including a clear and inclusive hate crimes bill. We could work to close the gender pay gap. We could minimize barriers to employment like childcare, elder care, education, discrimination, and transportation. That's ways that we can build a healthier economy. And while a $2.3 billion surplus looked attractive on the surface, it also shows that we failed to invest in our citizens and strike a sensible balance. Because at the same time we had all that money sitting around, our roads needed improved. Clearly our technology needed improved, as noticed by all the kids who don't have Wi-Fi while they're trying to go, have virtual school. And
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole.
thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Klein.
Okay, I would second Amy's comment about the all-inclusive hate crimes legislation. Having a lot of friends from Carmel that have graduated from universities and moved to the coast and found jobs elsewhere, one of the main things they say is the reputation that our state has is disappointing and something that they didn't want to stay to raise their family in. So I feel that we need to make a concerted bipartisan effort to just go ahead and move forward with some of those issues. We have to have an all-inclusive hate crimes legislation. I think it's unattractive to business. And then I'm going to go back to some of my staples that I discuss a lot with voters, especially in my district. Affordable childcare, transportation. Those are going to be two things that help all families in the state. I know that, we can talk about jobs coming into the state, but we also have people that are here now that are in neighborhoods and in districts that need transportation to get to those jobs when they do come. So I would like to see increased transportation and childcare.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Ms. Dechert.
I would have to agree with what some of the folks on the phone have already said. I work in a technology company. We are global, we are swift and nimble, and I like innovation, and I like learning how to do things in different ways. I think we have to continue to bring that sort of energy and excitement and innovation to Indiana. To do that, we have to be a place, our home, our Indiana, has to be a place that is specifically inclusive to all workers. We want smart kids who go to school all over Indiana, and maybe they stay here, go to Purdue, IU, or if they're smart, they go to St. Mary of the Woods, and to come back and stay here and work and live. And when they do that, they expect it to be an inclusive and welcoming place, regardless of gender, LGBTQ, Black, white, Latino, etc. So that is something important we have to do. Some of us are going to work from home. We live in those tech jobs, but we need transportation for the people who don't. We need to not limit mass transit. We have to have a living wage so people can afford housing.
Thank you, Ms.
We need
Dechert.
to make sure that we're training people for those
Ms.
jobs.
Dechert, thank you. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Yes, thank you very much. So on the wage issue, I had a bill a couple of years ago that basically said this, that as employers, it gave you a tax credit. For the employee, it helped give you a wage that would rise up to at least $10 an hour. It was a two-way street. Because what we know and what we have found through my experience of working in the Daniels administration, Department of Workforce Development, is that out of 2.7 million Hoosiers who currently work in our workforce, less than 69,000 are actually at minimum wage. And the reason why they're at minimum wage is because they're trapped because they don't have the skills. So we have to raise those skills up. As Speaker Huston said so eloquently and accurately, this economy is starting to move back. Indiana is a manufacturing state. Manufacturing is humming in the state of Indiana. Some of the other displaced industries because of COVID that need some help, we need to work with our Department of Workforce Development and job matching skills and try to help those folks find jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Our next question first will go to Mr. Huston. We offered the opportunity for several, for anyone to submit questions to our Facebook page. And so this is one of those questions from regarding veterans. And so Indiana doesn't exempt military income from state income tax, and other states do. Indiana law also requires every county to have a fully accredited veteran services officer, but provides no funding for such a position. And so the question is, would you support legislation to change either one of these situations? The exemption for state income tax for veterans and the funding by the state of the mandated veteran services officer. Mr. Huston.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not sure specifically what they're referring to. In the 2019 budget, we created a phase out of the taxation of their retirement funding. So that's a 4-year phase out. So that's already began. In relationship to the county service officers, we've looked at different, and we provide different funding mechanisms, I think, at the local level to do that. We continue to look at veterans issues every year. We have a strong record of supporting our veterans, and we want to make Indiana particularly a great place for those that are retired veterans to move back home or come here. They've got many of the skills and trades, skills and attributes that we want for the types of jobs that we're creating. So we'll always continue to look at veterans issues and feel like we've done a lot in the past to support our veterans. And thank you. So grateful for their service. We'll continue to do so in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
I don't think I have too much to add. Representative Huston said it all. I absolutely support exactly what he said and have continued to in past budgets, and will work and strive to make sure that they're in future budgets. And thank all veterans for their service.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Ms. Dechert.
I think that one of the issues about veterans that I always want to make sure that we cover is making sure that veterans know what benefits are available to them, particularly female veterans. In talking with women who are veterans and have served in the military, they don't often know what's available to them in Indiana. I think that we have to do a better job of making sure that they have access to those resources. I also really like and want to support programs that partner things like skilled trades, trade associations. For example, the carpenters have a fantastic program where they're taking veterans and they are putting them into the workforce, into those skilled jobs. I support and expanding programs like that to take care of veterans. I also think that vets pick up a lot of really valuable skills in the military, and we want to make sure that it's easy for them to take those skills and translate those skills into jobs in Indiana, and make it easy for them to do that in terms of accreditation and getting into those skilled jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Deckard. Going now to Ms. Rivera Cole.
Yeah, so to answer the original question, yes, I would support those programs that were suggested by the question. And I would also support legislation that gives veterans assistance in the job market and makes it easier for business to hire those who have sacrificed and served our country, and programs that incentivize veterans to start new businesses and give preference to veteran-owned businesses for state contracts, and remove restrictive timeframes to give military families as much access to needed assistance as possible. And one thing that's really important to me is to continue to focus on the growing problem of PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, and prevention of military suicides. It's imperative that we respect, care, and prepare for new sets of challenges met by our veterans so that they can come home to Indiana and be successful.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Moving next to Ms. Klein.
Yeah, I would say from a family full of veterans, my father included several of my cousins, grandfathers from World War II. One thing that Aimee touched on is, you know, after the service, when you come back to the States, when you start into your business and industry with the trades and the skills that the service has given you, it's nice to see some incentives as a thank you from the state. So if right now the state is willing to take that income out of their tax break there, I don't understand why we would be doing that, and also allowing corporate tax cuts in other areas. I think it's probably a budget factor that we could make room for in the Indiana state budget.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Mr. Qaddoura.
Thank you for the question. We need to vow to protect our veterans as they vow to protect us. On the question of income tax, I would fully support creating an exemption for our veterans. On the question of veterans support in terms of the service officers, I'm very proud to tell you when I was a city controller for Indianapolis, under my leadership, we raised the number of veteran service officers from 0 to 4. Because they were not funded from the state of Indiana. And as I met with many veteran groups in Senate District 30, they told me that they need more help with healthcare, with mental health and other services, and they need the state to step in with more funding. We give incentives as a state to big businesses. Why can't we give incentives to those who sacrifice their lives or put their lives on the line to protect all of us? I think it's a matter of priority and values that we place on money and budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Qaddoura. We'll be going to Ms. Klein first for the next question. This came from an environmental group. This particular question was submitted. So what legislation, if any, would you support to encourage renewable energy? And going along with this, do you think the state should take any kind of action with the extreme weather that exists regarding climate change with, you know, flooding, droughts, temperature changes? Should there be any kind of state action on that? And then also about renewable energy. So it's a two-part question, all in the energy realm, but I like to put them together. So Ms. Klein.
Yeah, thank you. This is a near and dear subject to me and my generation. My opponent voted to prohibit state environmental regulations from exceeding the EPA's regulations. To me, that just handcuffs the people that know their towns, know their farm fields, know their rivers, and know their issues. It should be a locally controlled issue. So to answer your question directly, yes, I think that would be the first step, is to make sure that we're not voting on behalf of stripping away IDEM from their regulatory authority. On top of that, from valuations of manufacturing buildings across the state, I've been in quite a few, I'll tell you, over the years. We absolutely have communities that are ready to start working in clean energy. We could be a leader in solar and wind turbine manufacturing. So I would like to see some programs to incentivize that. I mean, we have the 48th air quality in the nation due to the super polluters down near southern Indiana. So I don't know that all voters know that, and I would hope that we could change that.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Ms. Rivera Cole.
Yeah, the safety of Indiana's communities hinge on the ability of our lawmakers to listen to scientists and then prepare themselves based upon that information. You know, Indiana has opportunities right now for investment in infrastructures and businesses that keep the state ahead and well equipped of extreme weather patterns. And since last session, the supermajority decided to delay utility companies seeking to retire coal burning plants. I don't understand why we are trying to interfere with our state's transition to cleaner energy sources. I'm committed to protecting the environment and the health of our community, and not coal and power plants.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Mr. Qaddoura.
It saddens me to say this because in a nonpartisan way, it doesn't matter if Republicans or Democrats can come together. I want to see our climate change issue to be a top issue for our state. I want our environment to be protected because it's a human rights issue and it's good for business. We need renewable energy in the state of Indiana. You know, it's not enough just to talk about these issues. Literally, there is no agenda for the state of Indiana on environmental or climate change mitigation or litigation policies. We can be a role model for the rest of the nation in renewable energy. We can create tens of thousands of jobs, clean energy, renewable energy. I'm proud to say when I was at the city of Indianapolis, we came with the first city resiliency and sustainability plan in the history of the state of Indianapolis to reduce carbon emissions in the state of Indiana. I'm ready to take these ideas to the state Senate and push our leadership, both Democrats and Republicans, to work hand in hand to protect our environment and our climate.
Thank you, Mr. Qaddoura. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Let me tell you what I was opposed to first. Let me tell you then I'll tell you what I was for. So in Senate Bill, in 2017, I was against Senate Bill 309. I was a few members of my caucus that opposed what became the net metering bill, because I do believe in an all above energy strategy, both solar and wind. It creates jobs, it's renewable energy, it's clean energy. It's also good for business. Let me tell you what I'm for. Last year, I had the Forest Commission bill, which was a bipartisan bill, which was going to set forth the 100-year vision of our state forest. We need to plant more trees. This will help with climate change as part of renewable energy. So those are some of the things that I'm going to continue to champion in the Indiana legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Mr. Huston.
So we created the 21st Century Task Force, a bipartisan task force, to continue to look at these issues. We're all interested in continuing towards more renewable energies and making that a priority for all of us. But there's a balancing act too. You know, right now, you know, you don't want to be in a state in which there's brownouts, in which they don't have a plan to make sure that when manufacturers and employers throw on their lights or turn on their equipment, that they don't have the power for it to work. So Indiana's doing what is exactly the right thing to do. We're taking a smart, measured approach with the goal, and we will continue to have the goal, to move and utilize as much renewable energy as possible. We just have to make sure we do that in a responsible way, that we don't follow the leadership of other states who are dealing with energy crises of their own making.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Ms. Dechert.
Yeah, you know, I think that obviously climate change doesn't know the boundaries of states. We also have a lot of natural resources in Indiana, but we also have a lot of polluters in Indiana, and we continue to subsidize and put money towards fossil fuels and things in southern Indiana that are terrible for the climate and the environment in Indiana. And we see that with the abysmal rankings that we have for our environment. What I do know is that we're talking about jobs, and what I do know is we're talking about innovation. And, you know, Mr. Ruckelshaus, you know, you made the point about net metering. I agree. I think that's something we should be doing, but we could be leading and bringing good green manufacturing jobs to Indiana. You know, you can power 30,000 homes with just one single acre of farmland for solar. Those are things we should be investing in. You know, my family lives in Kokomo. We have the auto industry. We could be leading the way in clean you know, cars and things like that. So, you know, I don't think that yes, you have to be responsible, but I'm not worried about brownouts. I'm worried about advancing jobs, advancing technology, and not being at the bottom for environmental concerns in our country. I think that we can do both.
Ms. Dechert.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome, and you get to answer the next question first.
Okay.
There's not a question that we don't. There isn't, no, there is a question. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was like, what do you do? I'm not answering sports questions. I'm not answering who's going to win anything, or what about the Colts? Nothing like that.
Yeah, I am well versed in sports, but that is not the question.
Oh, okay.
Right. So instead, it's a very serious question that grips our country right now, is dealing with racism.
Yep.
And so as a member of the General Assembly or a prospective member of the General Assembly, we have to deal with the issue of Black Lives Matter. We have to deal with, you know, some type of reform in policing or racial inequities. And so what I'm interested in are your thoughts on these issues, and what do you think as a member of the General Assembly, what kind of actions can you take as a one member out of 150?
Yeah.
Ms. Dechert, to you first.
Sure. Thank you. I'm really glad I got to answer this. I have been working on race and equity and inclusion issues for my whole life. I'm currently on the Greater YMCA Committee on Diversity, Global Initiatives, and Inclusion, and we've been working across the community to make sure that we are making the Y a place that people feel valued and feel included. I've also been very involved up here at Geist talking about systemic racism and talking about anti-racist policies that we need to make sure Indiana is leading the way on. We all mentioned a comprehensive hate crimes bill. I think that is first and foremost that we need to go back and put the language in. We can do it in a bipartisan fashion, and I think that we should. But we also need to look at the inequities that are set up in our economic systems and in our educational systems to make sure we are addressing racism in an anti-racist way in the policy level. And that can do, yep, thank you. I'll let someone else take over.
Ms. Klein, you're up next.
Take it away.
Tag, Pam, I'm in. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So a couple of the things that the Black Legislative Caucus outlined that I think will help in all communities across the state are the anti-racial profiling laws that they're requesting. I think that, training and things, are necessary. The hate crimes legislation, we talk about that, I know enough tonight. But on top of that, the de-escalation training for officers is going to be important. I know that, Indiana lacks diversity across the statewide, countywide. When you go north to south, we have a varying degree of diversity in Indiana. But one thing that we do have is we have areas where the Black Caucus have asked us, to do this work, and I think we need to listen. They've been elected by their constituents, and I think it's time that we act this year.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Thank you. The management of the police and budgets, those are all local issues, but I stand with the governor. I think the governor has set forth a very good plan whereby body cams on state police officers, training, enhanced training for state police officers, and also bringing in someone in the cabinet level position to work on diversity in state agencies across the board. So I stand with the governor. These are the things that we as legislators can deal with. But again, the management of the police and budgets, it's all at the local level.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Mr. Huston.
Well, I would agree with John that I think the governor laid out a good plan, a plan I'm totally supportive of. I've also met with the leadership of the Indiana Black Caucus, and we've talked about these types of things that do matter to them and things that are important to all Hoosiers. And we have them at the table as we work with our partners in law enforcement too, to find a solution to this. These are things that we all care about. We all, Republican or Democrat, we all have a concern and a heart for this, and we'll work together and partner on it. And I'm pleased that we're to a good start, but we got a long way to go, and we'll continue to work at it together.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Mr. Qaddoura.
Thank you. Black lives do matter, and the state has a role to play in ensuring that our laws do not discriminate against people, including the state police, which oversees the regulations for the training academy. Recently, Indianapolis wanted to go as far as regulating certain things that the citizens want and demanded, but the state refused, or they sent a letter saying we're still debating and thinking. The state has a role to play in critically cleaning our laws to be sure we're not discriminating against people. The day that the state Senate and House voted on the watered down hate crime legislation, a Muslim was killed in Indianapolis an hour or 2 hours before. In our city, in our state, how many more Black lives needs to be devastated, and how many families need to be devastated before we take serious action? How many more terms, how many more elections do we need to wait until we wake up? Senate District 30 is one of the most diverse in the state of Indiana, and the reason they are asking for new leadership, because they are tired of the silence and being complicit with the racism that we hear every single day, especially what comes out of the White House.
Thank you, Mr. Qaddoura. Ms. Rivera Cole.
Thank you. So I am committed to building a diverse, equal, and inclusive community to all Hoosiers, no matter how they identify. And we need to address our challenges head on with courage, determination, and humility. I think I'm in a unique position having worked with law enforcement for like 20 years throughout my career. And I've come to the conclusion that the policymaking needs to shift away from dealing with economic inequality through the lens of the criminal justice system and move toward addressing the root causes. So one first step would be to conduct an audit of our state policies and eradicate policies that lead to greater racial disparities within the criminal justice system. People of color, particularly Black men, are disproportionately affected by homelessness and incarceration. So we need to try to break that cycle by changing the system at its very foundation. So that means investments in economic opportunities that can be done through social services programs, not on the back end through the criminal justice system. And that would decrease the correctional population.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Our next question, we're going to shift to education. And what role, this will go to Mr. Ruckelshaus first, excuse me. What role do you think the state legislature should take in determining what's taught in Indiana classrooms? So what role should the legislature play in determining what's taught in Indiana classrooms?
Well, I think, again, that's more of a local school corporation decision, limited to in that degree. One of the things that we really try to do as legislators is that strike that balance between local control and legislative control. So I think anything we can do to drive it down to the local level, the better.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Mr. Qaddoura.
I think the state needs, the General Assembly needs more balance in reconfiguring the logic of when do you give local control and when you control things at the state level. It is not fair to push things to the local level and then control the funding at the state level. And if you disagree with your local schools, then cut their funding. It doesn't work that way. We can't have it both ways. We need to respect teachers. We need to respect educators, let them make these decisions, and empowered by the state of Indiana. We need to lead by example. We need to fund our schools appropriately. We need to permanently decouple student performance from teacher evaluation. We need to be sure that we're funding professional staff in our schools for social workers and for mental health and emotional services. So the list is lengthy, and it's unfortunately in Indiana this year, I just read recently, we have about 600 vacancies for teachers because teachers are retiring en masse because they feel they are disrespected, they are not compensated well, and our schools, especially in COVID-19, are not safe for them to the point that they thought it's not worth it to go back to the classroom in a COVID-19 when the school is not safe.
Thank you, Mr. Qaddoura.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Huston.
Curriculum has always been decided locally. It's where it should. The state has determined academic standards, and then the ability of school districts to develop the curriculum to support students to achieve those academic standards has been decided at the local level, and I think that's the best policy and continue to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Ms. Rivera Cole.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with what you said. I mean, yes, I guess they have the ability to make their curriculum, but they also have to teach basically to a standardized test. They don't get to teach to inspire anymore. They have to teach to this testing that the school's funding is tied to, that their paycheck's tied to, and the teachers aren't allowed to teach to inspire. They're not treated like the professionals that they are. They're not given the kind of leeway they need to be able to make those decisions because they have all these ever-changing standardized tests looming over their head.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Ms. Dechert.
I think that my 12-year-old said it best, which is if you want to know how I'm doing in school, ask my teacher. And I think that that goes a long way when we talk about the money and the time and the effort that we spend to fund high-priced, expensive and ineffective tests that we've heard from teachers and administrators say don't adequately measure the progress that each individual student is making. And so one thing that I will say is that I trust teachers, I trust administrators to know how to benchmark and measure those kids individually and their performance. I appreciate academic standards for sure, but I think we need to decouple teacher pay from test scores. And many teachers that I know now have master's degrees and higher and are working second jobs and multiple jobs because they can't afford to live, and they are also not being respected for the knowledgeable educators that they are. So of course we need local control, but I think that we have seen that what we're doing in education in Indiana for traditional public schools, which educate the majority of kids who are going to be Hoosiers, who are voting, who are going to be productive
Thank you, Ms. Deckard.
citizens, we're not serving well.
Ms. Klein.
Thank you. I guess I'll go back to the original curriculum question and just touch on that. I agree with a lot of what's been said here, but let's think outside the box here maybe just for a minute. If we as a state have the ability to have funding and think tanks at our access, so to speak, for the state's economic future, if we were going to talk about systemic racism, and start battling, you know, that wall, start trying to tear down that wall that our state seems to continually have. I think it's within the realm to say that we could have some recommendations to school boards. Now, I'm not saying tell them what to do, but I think that if we have the ability to make, you know, a study summer session like everyone loves, to start working on, you know, maybe some suggestions to start breaking down some of those barriers.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. We're going to stay in the education realm for the next question. And so it's going to concern the economic part of education, the funding. And so the governor announced, obviously, that public school, the funding was not going to be cut for K-12 funding was not going to be cut this year, though other state agencies received, you know, varying cuts. And so what would be your priority for the future regarding education funding? And we go to you first, Mr. Huston.
Well, thank you. And the governor and I have been clear on this, that we intend to fund 100%. This is why we had the reserves. And, you know, when I stood on the House floor and defeated amendment after amendment after amendment of trying to spend money to keep those reserves, I didn't realize how important it would be. Again, not ever seeing the future of a pandemic, but I'm glad we have those reserves and we can continue to fund our number one priority, which has always been our number one priority. Over 50% of the state general fund budget goes to K-12 education. I'm proud of that. And then we've invested, like I said, $763 million new dollars in the K-12 education. We spend, you know, $7.5 billion alone just in the K-12 tuition formula. So, you know, it'll always be a priority. You know, you know, this is going to be a challenging budget for all of us. But K-12 education has always been and will always be my number one priority.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Going next to Ms. Klein. I'm muted. There we go.
Oh, sorry. I got lost in Speaker Houston's conversation there. Can you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything direct.
K through 12 funding, education funding, what would be your priority? You know, it's going to be other budget state entities were cut. K-12 education did not receive any cuts. So moving forward, and this is a budget year coming up, what would be your priorities regarding K-12 education funding?
Well, I do think it needs to be fully funded. And in fact, there has to be some kind of an increase. The schools have been put in a difficult spot trying to make shift to try to make all of this work that we've all been living with. If anybody on the call or anybody watching has children, this has been difficult. And I think teachers are in that same boat, along with losing teachers and trying to figure out how to work these budgets out. But I will record today and remember next year if we truly do not cut this budget. So I like that everybody's on the same board here on this call of 100% funding, and there won't be a 15% cut like that was discussed, I know a little while ago from the Republican Senate. But other than that, I think, you know, we just need to keep in mind, like, we're already 90% of our kids are in public schools. And in a situation where tax dollars are tight, I think we just need to make sure that we're taking care of the tax-funded public schools.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Ms. Dechert.
You know, public school is near and dear to my heart, and I think, you know, I don't disagree with anything that Ashley and others have said. It's a huge part of the budget, and it is going to be tough. It's a budget year, right? And we're going to have to make some tough decisions. But I think we're all agreeing that public education is the biggest investment that we can make in Hoosiers, and frankly, in our economy moving forward. And if we're going to keep Indiana moving forward, we need to make sure that we don't lose more teachers. So we're going to have to make sure that we're paying them adequately. They're under a tremendous amount of stress and pressure. They're working ridiculous hours. So I'm going to go to the State House. Public education is my #1 priority, to fund it properly, to fund teachers properly, to fund the infrastructure for schools, and to take care of our kids. And so I'm hoping that at the State House in January, we can all work together and remember how important we all said fully funding public education really is.
Thank you, Ms. Deckard. Mr. Qaddoura.
I am fiscally responsible. As a city controller in Indianapolis, I balanced 3 balanced budgets with almost unanimous votes, Republicans and Democrats, upgraded the city's credits 5 consecutive times, and saved the taxpayers over $70 million. Being fiscally responsible does not contradict with placing high value on education in our state budget. Over the past 10 years, my school district, where my daughter goes in Washington Township, lost $72 million over the past 10 years. My school district lost teachers. We need to fix the funding formula. We need to fix the complexity index. We need to be sure that we place a moratorium on voucher programs that go to 50% of students who never went to public schools. So when we say we increased funding for public schools, it is not fully accurate, because $170 million, roughly speaking, every year gets diverted to the voucher program and it does not go to our traditional public schools. We need to raise teacher pay, and we need a fully funded universal pre-K in the state of Indiana. We're one of the last states in the country to fund such programs.
Thank you, Mr. Qaddoura. Ms. Rivera Cole.
Well, Mr. Qaddoura, you said most of what I was going to say. So I agree with you about the voucher program. I'm thrilled that we have over half of the budget going to education, but notice that Speaker Huston did not say to public education, because as Mr. Qaddoura pointed out, we have almost $170 million a year going to fund students who've never attended public school, who can make up to $90,000 and still get some of these vouchers. The program, if we didn't have the voucher program, HSE would have, just HSE schools alone would have at least $2 million extra a year. So every parent out there who's had to work the fundraiser, who's had to do the bake sales, who's had to scrounge to find that extra money, well, there's $2 million per year that we could have for our schools if we just put a moratorium on the voucher program.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Thank you very much. We will continue to fund public schools 100%. I said this from day one. I'll say it all the way through. Indiana is one of the top states in the country as a percentage of our budget, over $7.3 billion. Let me repeat that, $7.3 billion goes to public schools in the state of Indiana, where it should. I'm a proud graduate of Pike High School. Go Red Devils. And so we're going to continue to work on that. I would definitely agree that the complexity index is something, especially in our schools, our suburban schools, which are having some of the same issues in poverty as some of the urban schools. We need to work on that, and we will continue to. And lastly, in the last budget contract, that the majority of the schools teachers receive several thousands of dollars, much needed raises. And we're going to do the very best we can to continue that in the next session.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus. Our last question is more of a fun one. We've tackled some tough topics tonight, so we need a little bit of relief here. And so I guess you get to pick just one word that best describes you. One word that best describes and your commitment to be a quality legislator, excuse me. All right, and we're going to start with Mr. Qaddoura first.
Integrity.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Ruckelshaus?
Bipartisan.
Thank you. Ms. Rivera Cole? Didn't hear you.
Committed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dechert?
Passionate.
Thank you. Ms. Klein?
Empathetic.
Thank you. And Mr. Huston?
Thoughtful.
Okay, and now, good job, and everyone stayed under a minute there. How about that? Isn't that amazing? We're now going to move to closing remarks, and you do have a 1 minute for that. As I indicated, we'll go in the reverse order with Ms. Dechert going first.
Well, I'll get this out of the way, and on behalf of all the candidates, thank you all again for having us here tonight. It was great. For me, I live and breathe these issues. I've always been concerned about people in my community and how I can best help them. And the way that I decided to do that was to go down to the State House and be a bipartisan, hardworking, empathetic legislator who wants to improve public education for all students, who wants to make sure we're putting the focus on public health, who wants to assure that we have an economy that works for everybody, and to make sure that our home, that our Indiana, is an inclusive and welcoming place for all Hoosiers and for anyone who wants to come here, visit, live, and raise their family. So I'm proud to run, and I appreciate very much. I'll thank everybody here tonight. It's nice to be seeing people, and you are right. And I am wearing jeans on the bottom, just so we all know there's jeans. Didn't even do yoga pants. But thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I hope I can count on your support in November.
Thank you, Ms. Dechert. Ms. Klein?
She's a tough act to follow. No, I just want to thank you again for doing the forum tonight. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm excited to serve the people of Carmel. I'm excited to see a new voice in our district. My opponent's been there for a very, very long time, and I thank him for his service, but I do think it's time to pass the baton, and I'm here to do that. I'm dedicated to Carmel. It's a safe, wonderful place to live. It's why I chose to be here and stay here with my 3 kids and my wife. So get involved if you're watching out there in internet land. The website is kleinforindiana.com, and you can follow us on Facebook at Ashley Klein 2020. If you sign up to volunteer, hey, you might do 1 shift, you might do 10, who knows? But either way, we're here for you. We're excited to have you. This is going to be a big election year, and I thank you all for getting involved in 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Moving down to Ms. Rivera Cole.
Like everyone said, thank you. It was really fun having these conversations with everybody tonight, so I appreciate you having us. Hoosiers have an opportunity with each election to decide the kind of state that we want to be. And I want to be able to tell my kids and hopefully my grandkids that I did everything that I could to try to support public education and keep it from being starved into failure. That I did everything I could to make sure Indiana was a place where women have control over their own reproductive rights, or where everybody has the same opportunity to contribute to their community no matter how they identify. I want to make sure that we live in a state where there's common sense gun regulations so that not one parent ever has to go through the horror of experiencing another school shooting. But at the end of the day, I know that we basically all want the same things, and that's for our families to be happy, to be healthy, to be safe, and to be nearby.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera Cole. Mr. Huston?
Again, thank you for having us tonight. Enjoyed the conversation. I do want to just note, you know, Indiana ranks 1st in the Midwest and 5th in the nation by Chief Executive Magazine's Best and Worst States. We have the #1 ranked infrastructure plan in the nation. We rank 4th for business friendliness, according to CNBC. And, you know, in the last 5 years, Indiana led the country in job growth among small firms, technology firms. You know, we're moving in the right direction. Every barometer, everything tells us that we are on and continue to be on the right path. People want to do business here. We're attracting people. We're attracting firms like Salesforce, who continues to grow their footprint. Emphasis. Some of the top tech companies in the country are coming here. So, you know, look, we're on a roll. We want to continue it. I think hopefully I've been part of the leadership that's created that environment, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huston. Mr. Qaddoura?
The stakes could not be higher this election. There's a clear choice. It's unhealthy for Indiana to have a supermajority of any party. This is not how bipartisan works. This is not how democracy is protected. So with the passing of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, reproductive rights, social equality, LGBTQ+ rights are all on the line. And there's a direct connection between the national elections and the local issues that we deeply care about. If there's a year that our lives will depend on it, it's this year. We need everyone to stand up for what is right, for everyone to stand up for common sense solutions. You know, it's unfortunate in our communities when we recite the statistics about how great our state is, those statistics neglect the voiceless in our community, the voters in my district that I speak with every day that lost their jobs and lost their homes and lost their businesses. So we need to be more compassionate as a state. We need to have redistricting reform that restores balance because it's not healthy for democracy. And we need everyone to participate. Please visit my website at fadyforindiana.com. Would be honored to represent you. Thank you.
Mr. Ruckelshaus.
Thank you all for participating. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. In 2017, right after my election, a hard-fought election like this election is as well, I went to Carrie Hamilton. Carrie, let's have a bipartisan town hall, bipartisan, bicameral. We created that. Representative Delaney joined us, and then soon Senator J.D. Ford joined us. We have the largest town hall, bipartisan town hall in the state of Indiana. We have over 300 people that usually join our town halls. I ask for your vote. I ask for your support so we can continue this. This is true bipartisanship. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ruckelshaus, and I'd like to thank all of the candidates for your time tonight. My apologies at the beginning for not having everyone test their technology. That's on me. I'm so sorry, but you know, we got it all worked out. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Hamilton County League of Women Voters President, Lisa Dick.
Thank you, Janet. Our forums will conclude next Monday, September 28th, as we will host the candidates for the U.S. 5th Congressional District of Indiana. The League would like to remind our audience that Hamilton County residents must register to vote no later than October 5th. And today is National Voter Registration Day, so if you haven't done it yet, why not? Absentee ballot applications to vote by mail must be received by 11:59 p.m. on October 22nd. Early voting in Hamilton County will begin on October 6th. This year, there will be 8 locations for early voting, including sites in Noblesville, Carmel, Fishers, and Westfield. Vote411.org is an online voter guide funded by the League of Women Voters Education Fund. You can find information about candidates, early voting, ID requirements, election dates, polling place locations, registration deadlines, and soon this video, and more. All Hamilton County candidates have been invited to participate in the Vote 411 candidate survey, and information provided by candidates is not edited by the League. Candidates, thank you all so much for your participation this evening, especially in these very trying times where we can't get together in person and talk face to face. We really appreciate the fact that each of you was willing to participate in a different format with us. This recording will be posted to the League of Women Voters of Hamilton County's Facebook page by 7 p.m. tomorrow. Peg and Sarah, thank you both for your efforts to make this evening run smoothly. Thank you all and have a good evening.